Early morning. Bayou Sauvage awakens. A package, bound in rope, breaks the water's surface and floats in the gentle current. From the reeds near shore, the Creole king emerges and moves in for a closer look.
Approximately 7:30 that morning, I was driving down the road and observed a couple of alligators in a tug of war with something that looked like an old sail.
Wrapped inside the sail, the alligators find a body.
And then later on in the morning, I guess the alligators were able to get the sail from around the body and proceeded to start eating the limbs off.
Police move in, but the gators are reluctant to surrender their prize.
They were playing tug-of-war for a good while with this alligator, and two more alligators, actually smaller than the first one, grabbed onto the body.
What is left of the body is brought to the coroner's office in Orleans Parish.
And we noticed that the hands were tied behind his back and tied in a hog-tied fashion to the ankles.
The bindings rule out any finding of an accidental death. The coroner, however, needs more before he can turn it over to the homicide table.
He was extremely difficult to find a source of his demise.
The gators had ravaged the corpse from just under the chin, all the way down the left side of the chest. The right side, however, is still intact. It is here that the coroner finds a single stab wound and makes his case for murder.
We were lucky in that because if that stab wound would have been on the left side where the alligators were feeding, it would have been destroyed, and we would have not been able to tell what this man died from.
The next question for the coroner: who is the man pulled out of the Bayou Sauvage? Again, their luck holds true.
What we're looking at here is a photograph taken from the top of his head and shows the massive bite marks up on the top of his head and on the back of his head.
The alligators have spared most of the victim's jaw. Forensic experts chart the teeth and take x-rays. A few weeks later, dental records come in on a missing person, 58-year-old Lester Henson.
I got our chart out, and I got these x-rays, and I got the chart on Lester Henson. These are all fillings, and we were able to match the shapes of these with the notations we had done in our chart.
Dental records confirm the body is that of Lester Henson, a man convicted of child molestation, first in Alabama, then in Louisiana. Homicide detective Bradley Rhodes believes Henson might have tried once again to prey on someone's child and might be the reason his body found its way to the bottom of a Louisiana bayou.
If I'm receiving information that he's a convicted child molester and that he's still practicing these tactics on kids, maybe he molested someone's kid and they did this in retaliation.
In New Orleans, Lester Henson worked for the city's recreational department with easy access to children. Detectives quickly focus on one parent, a father whose family Henson had gotten especially close to. The father's name, Ricky Alford.
One witness informed me that Ricky's children called the victim Uncle Lester, and that it was some indication that Lester Henson had molested his kids.
Ricky Alford has a past of his own, a string of arrests for petty crime and assault. If Henson got close to one of Ricky's kids, Alford would be a likely candidate to retaliate. On October 7th, Rhodes brings Ricky Alford in for questioning.
I asked him some pertinent questions as it relates to this murder, and he kind of froze up and requested that the interview be concluded and requested that his attorney be present during any further investigation.
Rhodes, however, has no physical evidence that links Alford to the crime.
Right after my interview with him, shortly after, he disappeared from the city. We tried to hunt him down, we couldn't locate him.
Alford resurfaces a year later in Massachusetts. He is charged and convicted of a second murder. The conviction tells New Orleans detectives Alford can kill, but offers no new leads in the Henson case. As Ricky Alford sits in a Massachusetts jail cell, the pulse of New Orleans continues to beat. 366 homicides in '95, another 350 in 1996. The memory of Lester Henson's death grows dimmer. The case, over time, goes cold. Until one day when a man decides to steal a bike. Early afternoon at Tulane University, a young man eyes a rack of mountain bikes. Under his coat, he grips a pair of pliers. A police squad rolls past. The cop inside recognizes Benjamin Scardino, a street addict and a thief.
Benjamin Scardino tells the arresting officer that he wants to talk to someone in the homicide division concerning a murder they had information about.
To avoid a charge of criminal trespassing, Benjamin Scardino is willing to trade information on a murder.
Homicide deal.
Cold case detective Dwight Deal takes Scardino's story.
He's anxiously telling me about his brother and his first cousin being involved in a murder. And this murder was also involving another person who he said was incarcerated on another murder upstate, is the term he used.
The man upstate is Ricky Alford, incarcerated on a charge of murder in Massachusetts. The brother and cousin Benjamin Scardino fingers are Raymond Scardino and Aristide Landry, two locals known to the NOPD as petty thieves. Benjamin Scardino says the three killed Lester Hanson and dumped his body in the Bayou some 3 years earlier.
I had Benjamin Scardino show me where his brother and first cousin lived. They lived together in an apartment here in New Orleans area.
Deal rousts Scardino and Landry from their New Orleans flat. The pair is brought downtown for questioning.
Would you please state your name and date of birth for the record?
Raymond Paul Scardino, 12659.
At 3:37 p.m. on March 14, 1997, Detective Deal begins his interrogation of Raymond Scardino. In a room nearby is Scardino's cousin, Aristide Bud Landry.
Can you read and write the English language?
Yes, sir.
Scardino and Landry talked to cold case detectives for more than 3 hours.
These two people were both very talkative, especially Scardino.
All I ask is that y'all do let it be known that I did cooperate. Y'all had no trouble from me.
Almost run out of tape just trying to deal with what they had to say.
I have no reason to lie, and I do want it to be known that I did not, God is my witness, I did not have nothing to do with this man's death.
As Deal listens, the pair begins to unroll their version of what happened to Lester Hanson one night on the Bayou.
Me and Aristide, we both love to fish and swim. We're outdoors people. And Ricky would come by and get us and invite us out to a fishing camp. So we decided to go out there one day and go fishing.
Typical fishing day, just a regular day, as far as for going fishing. If you can't catch no fish, you drink a few beers.
This gentleman came up to the pier where we were, and him and Ricky stepped off to the side and had a little small talk. They chit-chatted for a little bit.
And that was my first real encounter with Lester, and right from the bat, you could tell he had homosexual tendencies because he was, a real flaming queen, a real old flaming drag queen.
And he walked away, and then as Ricky came back, you could tell that, there was something there. There was just, you could tell there was some friction there somehow. You could feel it. We knew it. You could feel it. There was just tension.
Lester Hanson leaves the three to fish in peace. As night falls, he returns with an invitation to dinner.
It was around dusk, and here come that gentleman again. And it was at that point that they started discussing something, and he said, would y'all like to come in and eat?
So when he came back, we didn't really want to be rude, ugly to the guy, so we said, go ahead and went on over to his house with him.
And Ricky commences to tell us about how this man molested his children.
According to Scardino and Landry, Alfred believes Lester Hanson has molested at least one and perhaps three of Alfred's children. The three men sit down to dinner with Hanson. The drinking continues. Alfred's words give way to violence.
We had all been drinking, we had been. And I guess it was just eating him away. He said, you molested my kids.
Lester turned his back to Ricky rather than face him face to face, and he turned his back on him, and he put his head down. He said, I just couldn't help myself.
Ricky became berserk.
He grabbed a knife off the kitchen counter, about a steak-sized knife, and cut him across the throat.
There was no stopping him. He had blood in his veins. There was no stopping him. No stopping.
Before he hit the ground, I believe he'd already had another knife in his hand. That's the one, a big knife. He saw it, he stuck it through him.
Yeah, he stabbed him in the back. He stood over him and took that knife and plunged it into that man's back.
We was looking at each other. Raymond lunged for him. I think he tried to grab Ricky.
And I told him, that's enough, you know, that's Jesus, that's enough. Knock it off. Just stop.
I thought Ricky was going to cut Raymond for a moment there, you know, and he had that look in his eye, and I hollered at him, and I hollered Ricky, and that's when Ricky, you know, he kind of like he woke up. It was like he was somewhere else.
He looked like the devil himself standing there, blood splattered, and we realized we were in so much trouble at this point. God, we are in so much trouble.
As Lester Henson bleeds out, Ricky Alford drops the knife. For a moment, Ray Scardino considers adding Alford's body to the one on the floor.
You want to know what I was really thinking of? Seriously, I was thinking about killing Ricky. Forget me into that mess. There was one person to link me to that crime, and I'm one to eliminate any type of loose ends. Always have been, always will be. And he was my loose end, and I was scared.
Neither Scardino nor Landry make a move to call the police. Each claims to have a good reason, their own past.
I have a criminal record, and there was no way that I could implicate myself in a homicide without being charged.
The thought may have crossed my mind, but here he was with a big old Halloween-looking knife, and it was in the middle of the night, and I had a broke leg, and it was pitch black out there, and I wasn't about to struggle with somebody that just stabbed somebody, cut somebody's throat, and stabbed them up.
I'm not a saint, but I'm not a killer. I had one out, and I took it.
The two men cast their lot with Ricky Alford and decide to help him dump the body.
He went out the door and came back in with some type of tarp.
Wrapped him up like a little hot tamale, you know, and rolled him in it, and toted him out and put him in the trunk of the car just like that.
And at that point, it was just disposal. What do we do? How do we get rid of this body? Where can we put this body?
Must have grabbed some cinder blocks out the yard. He threw them in the trunk and some rope. And that's how his intentions were to get rid of him, to sink him in the bayou.
As night stretches into early morning, the three men start up their car and head toward the bayou. In their trunk, the bound and wrapped body of Lester Henson.
And we take off down the chef with it. Just mass confusion, chaos, mass confusion, yelling, hollering, you know. How could you get us into this, you idiot, you moron? And he pulled up into this little divot off the side of the road where they launch boats. We put the bricks on top of it, swam out with it. Aristide wasn't able, so I made Ricky go with me to do it. You're a mess, you're gonna help me clean it up. So we swam out and we sank it. Went back to the house and started cleaning up. Cleaned up the house for about 3 hours. We were in that house cleaning up. Buckets of blood, God. It was a mess.
And that is the story of Ray Scardino and Aristide Landry. Two ex-cons in the wrong place at the wrong time.
All I wanted to do was go fishing. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to go fishing. Minding my own business.
But cold case detective Deal, for one, is not buying it.
These guys were almost, I really called them, and my secretaries in the office called them made for television. They were not these traumatized individuals who just found themselves in a bad place. You know, they went there knowing what was going to happen.
Deal's next stop, a Massachusetts prison, where Ricky Alford has a different take on what happened on the bayou.
My name is Ricky Joe Alford.
On May 1st, 1997, cold case detective Dwight Deal visits Ricky Alford in a prison outside Boston, Massachusetts. Alford is serving a life sentence for murder. Deal, however, has come to talk about another killing. One that happened 3 years earlier and 1,100 miles away in the Bayou of Louisiana. Alford has been fingered by Ray Scardino and Aristide Landry, who claim Alford killed Lester Henson in a fit of rage. Alford admits to the killing, but says he did not act alone.
Mr. Scardino started to talk to me about the problem I had with my children possibly being molested by Lester Henson. Scardino started telling me we ought to do something about it. We ought to find out if he did it.
According to Alford, the three men then started to interrogate Henson.
Lester Hansen said that the only thing he did was give my child a shower, and he played with him a little bit. Well, Raymond got upset. He said, "I'm gonna get the son of a bitch." He leaned over, ran up, and hit him. Mr. Buddy came around and hit Mr. Lester with a stick.
They beat him, and they tied him up at some point, hands behind the back, and set him in a chair while they did this mock interrogation, all three of them talking to him about the alleged molestation.
Mr. Scardino had Mr. Hansen by the hair with his head leaned back with a small knife. He took the knife, henceforth cutting Mr. Lester's throat with it. Raymond Scardino started saying this is what he deserved.
After slitting the throat, the victim fell onto the ground and was pushed onto the floor, and they continued to question him. And I guess realizing the severity of his wound and realizing the seriousness of these people and their intentions, he decided to confess.
Lester at that time was gurgling to the blood coming out of his neck. Lester said he was sorry. He don't know why he did it. Mr. Scardino threw the knife at me and asked me to stab Mr. Hansen with it to finish him off, implying the man raped your kids. He molested your children. He didn't only hurt their body, but he hurt their soul. Henceforth, I turned around, rolled Lester over on his back, and took the knife and stuck it in his back.
Alfred's story pushes Raymond Scardino and Aristide Landry back into the picture. Instead of innocent bystanders, Alfred paints them as active participants in a planned interrogation and execution.
He told him that everything that happened, I did it. That I was the one that killed a man. He had nothing to do with it. I told him, stand up, be a man about yourself. He molested your children. If they were my kids, let me show you how to do this. It became, this is what he said now. Mind you, this is what he said. This isn't what happened, but this is what he said. I don't want to get this confused. I don't want y'all thinking that I'm a cold-blooded murderer. And he put all the blame on me.
I think Raymond was the architect of the entire thing. Ricky had the motive, and I think he had to be urged on by Raymond Scardino in order to even get involved in this whole thing.
For cold case detective Deal, an execution scenario is a far better fit with the evidence. He points first to Hansen's body, his hands and feet found hogtied behind his back, the hallmark of an execution-style slaying. Then there are Hansen's injuries, a cut throat and a puncture wound to the back. Two very different types of wounds, the signatures, according to Deal, of two different attackers.
In my years of investigation, I've noted that when a person starts out slashing, they end up slashing. When a person starts out stabbing, they end up stabbing.
Raymond Scardino, Aristide Landry, and Ricky Alford are indicted for murder. The case against Scardino and Landry resting largely on the statement of Ricky Alford, one that is about to undergo a major facelift. A year after his first statement, Ricky Alford talks to Dwight Deal for a second time.
Do you wish to give us a statement in the matter concerning the death of Lester Hansen?
Oh, yes, I do.
In his second statement to Deal, Alford takes complete responsibility for killing Hansen, dovetailing with Scardino and Landry's story that he acted alone in a fit of rage.
And I couldn't believe that he did this to my children. And I told him over and over, why did you do it? Finally, Lester just said straight up, I could not help myself. I could not stop myself from doing it. And I said, why my kids? And then I flipped out. I just can't believe you did this to my kids.
I think he's a sympathetic character. What Ricky did was not right in any stretch of the imagination, but I think a lot of people who heard his story wouldn't be too sad about the demise of somebody who was a child molester.
Really, it's the only way that he could have presented it to the jury, I think, where the jury could have actually considered the victim's past with this crime and could have possibly been found not guilty. It was really his only defense.
The enraged father defense accomplishes two things. It takes Raymond Scardino and Aristide Landry off the hook for the actual killing, and it probably allows Alford to avoid the death penalty.
I know what I did was wrong, and I flipped out, and I I wasn't going to let it go on. I said, it's got to stop here. And I know if he did survive, there was no proof for the children, so he was going to walk away scot-free. The man was with other children at the time, and he was going to do it again.
They knew that Ricky Alford would come across as a very, very sympathetic character, especially with a death-qualified jury. You would have a situation where you would have a bunch of people sitting up there who believe in a death penalty. And usually when people believe in a death penalty, they also don't take too kind of a look at a child molester.
Things got heated. I got flipped out. He was leaning. I grabbed the knife. I grabbed him by the head. I cut his throat.
And what we would be saying to the jury, or what we would have said to the jury, was somebody had to stop this guy. And Ricky did.
Given the evidence the way it was once we were in a trial posture, we were a week prior to trial, we really didn't see any other alternatives other than to plead out the case. And it was disappointing, knowing the amount of effort that Detective Deal had put into it.
On July 30th, 1999, Ricky Alford pleads guilty to murder and is sentenced to 15 years in Louisiana State Prison. As for Raymond Scardino and Aristide Landry,
I'm not sure that I classify Scardino and Landry in the same way. They may have had a bigger role in this case. I believe, again, that they all three went in knowing that something very bad was going to happen in that house on the Bayou. But to what degree, we may never know.
Scardino and Landry each plead guilty to manslaughter. They are given credit for time served and set free.
I feel blessed to be alive. I feel great to be free. I'm on parole, but I'm free. I'm able to walk in and out of a door when I please. I don't have someone telling me when to eat, when to sleep, when to get up, when to do this, when to do that. And when you weigh that against a conviction, there's no comparison. I'm not worried about that conviction.
For Dwight Deal, it's a deal gone sour. In his judgment, 3 men were responsible for the death of Lester Henson, and 3 should have gone to jail.
I'm definitely frustrated. Anytime we put in a situation where we have to plea people, I charge them with what they should have been charged with, and they were indicted for what they should have been charged with, and that's what I really would have liked to have seen them, or preferred to have seen them charged with, and to go through a full adjudication where we go to trial.
The law disagreed, and so Raymond Scardino and Aristide Landry are free men. Free to choose a life in peace or another cycle of revenge on the man who fingered them for the murder of Lester Henson in the first place, their brother and cousin, Benjamin Scardino.
I thought about it. I would be lying if I said I didn't, but that's not me. That's not me. It wouldn't be worth it. As far as I'm concerned, I have him as a brother no more.